Hey, all you cool cats and kittens. Things have been so crazy in the world of MMA. We had to get this man back on the show for a second episode in a row. With UFC Island, a real thing, our next guest may be the Tom Hanks to this MMA Castaway Island. Instead of Wilson, a trusty beer. Instead of a homemade raft, a beautiful blue polo to carry him home. Like the show Survivor, this man will outwit, outplay, and outlast. Step over Freeman, the real Morgan is in town. John Morgan, welcome to another special episode of Submission Radio.
Man, that intro started out so bad. I was like, I think he messed up, man. I don't know if he brought it this time, but by the end, the quality was there, man. I've got to. You saved that one. You saved that one, bro. I got to give you a lot of props for that.
Did you think you were on the line with Carol Baskin when he started with the cool cats and kittens? Did you think you were talking to Tiger King herself?
I was like, it's my time. I must be lunch tomorrow. Oh, my goodness. What's going on?
Yeah, well, speaking of lunch and wild exotic animals, let's kick it off with possibly the most important thing of all. What did you think of Dana White's private island? What do you think this island looks like? Will it be more James Bond villain-esque or perhaps more Jurassic Park? Maybe armed guards with special uniforms and helmets? Maybe a moat with sharks surrounding it? What are we thinking here, John?
It's crazy, right? I mean, it's Enter the Dragon in real life, man. I mean, I heard it, and at first, I saw a couple quotes, a couple headlines, and I thought maybe he was just kind of being facetious, having a little play or something like that. And then I checked out, the interviews and watched him. I said, oh my God, he's serious, man. They're gonna do this. So, yeah, man. I mean, I have no idea what this thing is gonna look like. I will say that I am incredibly intrigued and amazed that they are going through something like this. So, I mean, unprecedented times to say the least, and this is a pretty damn unprecedented solution.
I mean, in all honesty, when you realize this island might actually happen, I mean, is it the most ridiculous measure that you ever heard of, having a private island just to host fights? And if you had to guess, where would this island be, do you think?
Man, yeah, it's over the top, I would say. I mean, ridiculous, I guess, or practical as hell. I mean, I don't know. I guess when you buy the island, I guess you become like your own sovereign nation or something along those lines. I mean, I don't know exactly, how the laws of international waters work, but it's pretty crazy. It's pretty incredible to see what they're doing. As far as location, man, I have no idea. I mean, listen, I'm in regular communication with USC staff, obviously, and I try to talk to UFC President Dana White, as often as possible as well, just to kind of pick his brain on some stuff or to, try to get information when I can. Mm-hmm. And no one will say anything about, where UFC 249 is going to be located. Certainly not where this island is going to be. I mean, I have never, in my entire time of covering the sport, I've never seen anything this top secret. I mean, literally, you guys know, You've been around the business for a while. Stuff just it makes its way out. People talk, right? You hear about things. Nobody is talking about this. No details are being shared. So at this point, man, anything you do would really just be a guess.
I love it because it's like if you follow the timeline, it's like, UFC 249 is going to happen, right? And then it's not going to happen. And then Dana White's like, all right, you want to bet against me? Like, I'll get it done. I feel like a phone call was made to Dana, like, Dana, yeah, we just got news, like, nothing's available, no locations. Fuck it, buy the island. Just do it. We'll make our own island. We'll make our own rules. I'm just wondering, John, like, other than this being sort of something straight out of a movie, what do you think the pros and cons are of having this island? I know, like, details are scarce, and it's one of those things where we'll know more when we know, but I guess when it comes to, say, like, athletic commissions, the UFC possibly self-regulating, even basic things like maybe hospitals nearby, for transported fighters, how do you think something like this could potentially work if this is a fresh island?
You touched on the biggest one right there. I mean, to me, the hospitals and the medical care, I mean, that's the most important, right? I mean, this is a dangerous sport. I mean, I think it's regulated in such a way it's as safe as possible. At the end of the day, I mean, what we're watching is hand-to-hand combat, and people do get injuries and people do get hurt. And so, I mean, I think, probably the idea, gosh, if it's for purchase, I can't imagine that there's a bunch of facilities on it, but maybe it's like a little plot of land, like right next to a bunch of other plots of land that happen to have facilities. I mean, not like like a helicopter, like a care flight or something like that would be much worse than than an ambulance ride through traffic or whatever. I mean, but that would be my biggest concern. I mean, yeah, of course you can find a facility, you can find a building, you can ship cameras there, you can use satellites to upload the information. I mean, as far as presenting an event. Listen, that's possible. It'll be challenging, I'm sure, but I mean, some of the venues they've done in Brazil, and heck, even like the venue in Moscow. I mean, there's challenges that come in building an event there. It'll be a logistical concern, but they'll get it done, no question about it. And at the end of the day, we're just talking about event production. The concern is the medical care. That's the biggest one. I mean, I don't think the UFC, as far as athletic commissions, it would be nice to have an athletic commission in place, but the UFC self-regulates quite a bit. And by all accounts, they do a pretty good job at it. Mark Ratner I've never seen anyone question his integrity and what they try to do. So I don't think that, by being their own commission, they would necessarily try to cut corners. They do self-regulate all over the world, even currently, but that's the biggest thing. And listen, I'm saying that's the biggest thing, understanding that I'm sure the UFC has asked the same question as well. I mean, there's no way Jeff Nowitzki, Dr. Jeff Davidson, haven't talked about this, and I don't believe for 1 second the UFC is planning this and going, oh wait, we might need hospitals, and I didn't think about that. You know what I mean? So yeah. I'm sure it's addressed, but yeah, that would be my biggest concern: is what if somebody gets severely injured in one of these fights on this island? Where do they go?
In the Sharks.
And the other into the Sharks, yeah. Well, I was going to say, apart from the Sharks, the other big concern is the fighter island becoming Corona Island, because as we know, the spread is quick, and because everybody's going to be isolated in the same thing, there is absolutely no room for any tiny little mistake of one person getting onto that island with the virus. How much do you think that's a concern for the UFC? And how? I mean, it has been a challenge for countries like, places like UK, countries like, America, Italy, Spain to navigate, let alone a private island full of fighters.
Is it a challenge here? Trump tells us we're fine. Everybody's good. I mean, I watch it every day. I think.
Have you guys reopened the churches yet? Easter's coming around.
I think it's almost over, to be honest with you. I think it's done. No, listen, definitely a concern. I mean, like you said, the spread of this is the biggest problem, right? And the fact that you can be asymptomatic and spread it. I mean, we understand what the concerns are at this point. I'm sure precautions will be taken. I look at, I don't know if you guys had a chance to watch Chael Sonnen's Submission Underground event that he did. He put on an event a week after the UFC Brasilia event. And, he explained to me that, they had a situation where they had RVs lined up outside of the venues. They didn't even have locker rooms that were shared. Every athlete had their own little, trailer basically that they stayed in, so that all the athletes were separated, except that, of course, when they were grappling, obviously you got to make contact at that point, but you're doing everything you can to keep people apart. So I think the UFC will definitely, I imagine they'll do something like that, where everybody's kind of like a miniature style quarantine, even at the event site.
So I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you, John, is UFC 249. Before we get to this island, because Dana says that apparently this venue that UFC 249 will be at, they'll have it for probably the next couple of months. I know last week you were guessing Florida. Are you still sticking with Florida, or do you think maybe somewhere else? I know Dana said it's going to have a commission, so that may rule out sort of reservation land. But I know some people are guessing, maybe a native reservation somewhere in California.
I don't know. I saw Jeff Sherwood of Sherdog, Sherdog founder, tweeting out that it was Tachi Palace, which is, he actually still lives in Lemoore, California, where Tachi Palace is. That would sort of make some sense. That's in California, by the way, if anybody's not aware. That it's reservation land, and it is in California. They aren't overseen by an athletic commission, but the UFC could be their own commission again, or you could have some kind of tribal commission in place. They do have a committee, basically, if I recall correctly. It's been years since I've been out there, but used to do events out there regularly. The WEC held events there, which Reed Harris would certainly still have relationships with all those people that are out there in Lemoore, California. So that theory or that report seems fairly plausible to me, that could be it. So we'll see. To be honest with you, listen, I still have no idea, and nobody will tell me. It was funny. I reached out to Dana and I was like, man, now that you've announced this event, it's official. Can you tell me the location? He's like, oh, the location's ESPN. And at first I was like, oh, cool. They must have some studios or something. I was searching for where, ESPN had studios. And I'm like, oh, you dummy. And I was like, he's just telling you can watch it on ESPN. So I don't know. The idea of it being at the Tachi Palace doesn't seem crazy to me. We'll see. I have no idea. And I'm telling you, it's crazy. Nobody will budge. Normally I can get somebody to say, hey, don't tell anybody. You know what I mean? This is off record for sure. Don't sign my name. But here's where we're at. I can't get that at all.
Well, I mean, the craziness continues because during an interview, I believe, with Brett yesterday, Dana White said that none of the athletes would actually know where the location was, that everybody would meet at a location and then be like carpooled to where the fights would be, which adds another era of, is this thing real life, to when you look at UFC 249 actually happening? What do you make of athletes, I suppose, rocking up to one remote location that they would know of to then be transported to the secret location to where the fights would be? Is the UFC hoping to put like blindfolds on these people so that nobody knows where is the
cartel style?
John, is the hope that no one knows where this location is for a number of events? Do they believe this will actually happen?
No, I don't think that's the case. I think it's just the first one. I think they want to get the first one in the books before everybody knows what's going on. And listen, I mean, you can say what you will about that, whether that's fair on their part or whether it's right on their part. And to be honest with you, we talked recently about, me wanting to cover the event. That's one of the reasons I want to cover the event. I think an independent media source needs to be there that's asking the right questions and making observations. I mean, not that, the UFC will do a much better job and ESPN will do a much better job of filming everything and documenting. They'll have amazing shows that are polished up and look incredible that'll document it. Me, I don't have those type of skills. So I won't be able to make some kind of polished presentation like that. But somebody needs to be there asking questions, and somebody needs to be there just making observations. When they say, hey, we're taking every last, precaution. And I know behind the scenes, as we talked before, I mean, I know Dana White is talking to his staff and finding out, what do we need to do? What are the concerns? What are the problem points? How do we address them? I mean, they're trying to problem solve, but somebody needs to be there addressing it. So, long story short, and to get to your question, I mean, no, I don't think they intend for this to be a secret location forever. He says he's got it for a couple months. It sounds like they want to do the same venue for April 25th and just kind of get the ball rolling on the schedule again. I think by that time we'll know exactly where we're going and what's happening. To be honest, I think the UFC, and again, I haven't spoken with anybody about this, it's just my guess. I think they want to get one in the books and show everybody like, hey, we did it. We addressed those concerns. We know what the issues are. And somebody does have to be first. I mean, someone does, whether it be in mixed martial arts or another sport. I mean, somebody does have to be first in getting back out there. As I told you before, whether it's right or it's wrong, I don't know. Time will tell on that for sure. History will tell whether it was a good decision or a bad decision. But I do think, somebody needs to be there to kind of ask the right questions and to make the observations to see, hey, are they doing everything they can like they say they are?
Absolutely, because there's going to be a lot of stuff behind the scenes we'll need to find out about, the testing, the safety for the fighters, the safety for the staff. So we agree that, it would be great to have you there. What has the UFC told you about media being allowed there? We're hearing rumors of a selected few media possibly being allowed. We're guessing that you would be a part of that group. Do you know how few or what the restrictions are, or when you may find out whether or not, you'd be covering the event?
I don't know yet. I mean, my understanding is that more than likely I'll be allowed to go. But again, I don't even know where I'd be going to at this point. I mean, at some point, I got to book a flight and a hotel or something. You know what I mean? And listen, I mean, I've said from the beginning, I thought somebody, should be there. I think media, does play a role in situations like this. I'd like to be there. Now, if they were like, oh, by the way, we were able to get the Barclays Center again. It's in Brooklyn, New York. What do you know? I don't know that I would necessarily want to be in New York right now where it's really, really bad. So there are some questions. I mean, but, as far as I know, I'll be there. Hopefully, we'll get confirmation in the next couple of days. But as it's looking now, I think I'll be there.
Yeah, it's good to know that there are some places you wouldn't go, John, because like we said last week, we do want to have beers with you sometime in the future. So stay safe. But you're absolutely right, though, as far as like the necessity of you or an independent media outlet, being there to ask some of these questions. So obviously we got to talk about like the fight that we've ended up with, Tony Ferguson versus Justin Gaethje. I mean, on paper, it's a great fight that a lot of people understandably are excited about. But, you factor in the fact that these guys haven't had proper preparation, proper training camps, and just this whole, Khabib situation. I wonder, like, last week when we spoke, Khabib was kind of like 99% out, and then he sort of spoke to Brett Okamoto, and he said, look, if they gave me a location, I would basically be down. Now he's officially out. But I just found it interesting when, like, Dana White's whole whole angle on this whole thing has been the fighters want to fight, everybody wants to fight. But then you have Khabib saying, look, there's more important things right now. Health and safety is number one priority. We got to follow the world's kind of guidelines and we need to stay home. What did you make of that when, the main event of the very event that you're trying to save is basically saying, like, I don't feel safe enough to fight?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that has been an important note to make is that Khabib, you could say, oh, well, the travel bans made it impossible for him to get out. No, he can get out if he wants to. He chose not to. Now, it's dangerous in how you say that. That's it. And it's dangerous in how you present that, though, because I've seen fans say, this guy's running. He's scared. He doesn't. Come on, man. That's just the absolute most ridiculous statement I've ever heard in my life. But it is just important to note that, if Khabib wanted to get out of Russia, he could fly on a private jet. As we said, I'm sure the Russian government would be more than happy to give him permission to get out. So, he did make a decision. I don't question his decision for 1 second. I understand where he's coming from, especially when you add in the fact he went from San Jose to Abu Dhabi to Russia. At some point you just say, dude, I've jumped through enough hoops. That's enough. I'm drawing the line at this point. Especially being a man of faith the way he is, maybe he's saying, look, this is God trying to tell me. And again, I don't know that, but I could see someone saying, look, man, this is somebody trying to send me a message that you don't need to be there. You've already done enough. I understand Khabib's point, and I do not blame him one bit. I do not judge him one bit, and I certainly don't think he should be stripped, as I've seen some people calling for. As for the main event we got, it's a great main event, man. It's a phenomenal fight. Two of the most exciting guys in the sport, much less just the lightweight division. Incredible athletes. It's going to be phenomenal. How much preparation is going to affect things, we'll see. I've been saying all along, it is interesting with Justin Gaethje. He does share a manager with Khabib Nurmagomedov. So, if anybody was giving him some good intel, they're like, bro, I don't know if this thing's going to come together. You might want to go to the gym. He'd have that input. So, I think these two guys are going to be, one camp, a couple of weeks. I don't think that throws off everything. These two guys are martial artists and they train as a way of life. I think it's a great fight. I think it's risky on both their parts. Tony Ferguson, to take Justin Gaethje on short notice when you've already been an interim title holder once and you're just going for the interim title, not undisputed. It's a risk worth taking in some ways. But holding out wouldn't have been the worst decision. But I just think right now with the world the way it is, I think everybody's so uncertain. You kind of take what's at hand. So I love the fight. It sucks because it's not the fight that we wanted. It's not the fight that we've been waiting for over and over and over. But it's still a damn good fight.
And it's interesting because, Justin Gaethje and Tony Ferguson, big names to all the fans that have been following the sport. But when it comes to casual fans, Khabib was really the name that was going to bring that international, I suppose, audience to the fight. And he's sort of a little bit above, sort of in the same vein as guys like Conor McGregor and other big stars in the sport. That's where Khabib was. So I'm just wondering, how much interest do you believe this main event, this event in general, is going to have? Because on one side, you don't have anything. So people are watching NBA players play 2K on ESPN right now and do these imaginary races. On the other hand, Justin Gaethje isn't a guy that too many people outside of the bubble are really familiar with. How much pull do you think this will have to actually get people to spend $65 American dollars or 50 something Australian dollars or wherever they're going to watch it around the world to actually watch this fight live?
And don't forget, John, the virtual benefit concert, One World Together. It's going to be streaming everywhere. Jimmy Kimmel, I think, is hosting, and you got a whole bunch of other celebrities. It's a tough decision on Saturday night between the virtual benefit concert or UFC 249.
Justin Gaethje, Lady Gaga, John.
Is it a tough decision? Get out of here. What is wrong with you? You have just dropped several points in my book, sir. I used to consider you a friend.
We had points in your book. That's pretty good.
They're gone now. You're catch all in at that point. We're back to zero. But no, listen, I do think it's a very interesting question, right? Because on the one hand, you say, oh, man, this is the only live sport happening. Certainly they'll do great numbers. And I do think I think it'll be a successful pay-per-view. At the same time, I think the stats are that we've already had 10 million Americans file for unemployment. That's madness. The amount of people that are hurting. I live here in Las Vegas, and I can tell you, man, this community is hurting, man. There's so many people that their incomes are tied to the service industry, which doesn't exist right now, and they don't know when their next paycheck is coming. So, very, very scary time. So, on the one hand, yes, I do think they will have the benefit of being the only sport in the world that's live. People are starved for it. I'm one of those people that has watched one of those, virtual indie races, because I'm just like, I need something, people want sports. And I think, ESPN is obviously going to ramp up the support, man. They need live programming. They're playing old games, which, can only last so far. So, I do think they're going to get a heck of a lot of attention next week. And listen, I bet it'll get a lot of coverage too, because this is, let's be honest, it's a controversial decision, right? It's a risky decision. So I got to believe, I could be wrong, but I got to believe, some mainstream outlets. Now, granted, they got enough news to cover on their own, but I'm sure sports people, at least if not the news people, will want to go like, what? Like, why is this company going? Why do they feel it's okay? Well, everybody says. So I think they're going to get a lot of attention, but with all the attention that they're going to get, can people part with the $65 right now? If they're not even sure how they're going to pay their rent or their mortgage, I don't know. So, I don't see it being some like, oh my God, it's going to set the record because every single person is trapped in their house and they have nothing to do. I mean, I see the logic there, but when you think about the realistic nature of it, I think it'll be successful, but I don't think it's going to be a record breaker by any stretch.
And of course, no pubs, no bars, and the distancing laws and the fact that you can't be in big groups will obviously be an effect on that as well. It can't be, cheap organizing all these crazy flights, all these crazy precautions for the fights to happen, John, with no gate, with no merchandise, and all those sorts of things going back to the UFC. I mean, Dana White has already expressed that he's hoping to continue the train rolling and do event after event after event. But do you think if there's not as much interest as what the UFC hopes will be in some of these live events, it could actually lose money for the company? I'm talking about not pay-per-views, but more of these fight night events that might cost a lot of money to put on, but might not draw the viewership that the UFC and ESPN are hoping it will get.
Well, I mean, that's the beauty of the contract that they have, right? They're not tied into. I mean, they're getting paid for the product no matter what. I mean, it's ESPN that owns the pay-per-view, so they're the ones with the risk. And I mean, ESPN has nothing right now. I mean, think about that. I mean, they have nothing to show whatsoever. As you said, I mean, the NBA 2K games. I saw headlines the other day that they're going to play games of horse with guys shooting basketballs at their home gyms and stuff. I mean, listen, I applaud the creativity, and I appreciate the scramble. Trust me, man. I mean, at MMA Junkie, I mean, we've been doing more interviews than ever, just trying to keep the news, flow going, even though there's very little other outside of the status of UFC 249. So I get it and I respect it, but I think ESPN needs the UFC as much as anything right now, which is crazy. I mean, you think about Endeavor, what a massive company they are, but I mean, entertainment has shut down right now. So the UFC is the darling of Endeavor right now, trying to get things going. Same for ESPN. All these leagues are trying to get back, but it's going to be a couple months out. It's going to take, no other professional sports league has the ability to just be like, nah, we're going on, let's do it. And the UFC can. So, listen, I think the UFC product is going to be in high demand. I think ESPN is going to feature the heck out of it. So, as far as, finances, again, I think this is, the UFC is thinking short term for sure, but I think they're trying to, guarantee the long term health as well. So, I think they're going to do good. I think they're going to get attention through this, and I think the ratings are going to be pretty solid.
Yeah, the attention is going to be crazy for this event. Obviously, they're going to be under the global microscope. Brett sort of made a good point when he was on the show a couple of weeks ago about how they could be the heroes if this goes well. They could be like the saving grace that, hey, we had nothing, and then the UFC put on these sporting events and everything was fantastic. On the other hand, if somebody does emerge out of this with a coronavirus, it's a PR nightmare disaster. I was talking to Oscar Willis from the Mac Life yesterday, and he said, could you imagine if the UFC went on native land and brought the coronavirus to native land, just from a narrative, how terrible that would look. Obviously, fingers and toes crossed that everything is fine. The other thing that I find fascinating, and just going back to Justin Gaethje versus Tony Ferguson, is sort of, the reason why both these guys took the fight. Tony with sort of very little upside here, and Justin Gaethje, what do you think was sort of the more riskiest thing on his part, taking this fight against a very tough Tony Ferguson? And if he loses, he's kind of out of that title picture that he's been sort of on the cusp of for a very, very long time, at least in the near future. Or the other risk would have been sitting around waiting for that Conor McGregor fight, which we know how much he's wanted, and it kind of seemed, possible at one point before this whole coronavirus hit. What do you think was sort of the more risky option for him?
Yeah, honestly, I think sitting around and waiting was the more risky option, to be honest with you, for Justin Gaethje. I mean, again, we don't know what the future holds. And listen, I mean, maybe this thing lasts longer than expected and longer than hoped, and things change. And obviously, Conor McGregor has come out and said that, he's made some very public stands about how things should be shut down, and proud of him for taking that and giving those public service announcements. But so you kind of know where his attitude is right now, that maybe he's not thinking about taking a fight. So there is a lot of risk here, but there's a heck of a lot of upside. And I think Gaethje sitting around and waiting on Conor. I mean, I think we've seen that kind of sentiment change among fighters, right? I mean, a lot of fighters have said, sure, if Cowboy was one, I think Poirier's been one as well, where people say, yeah, Conor wants to fight, let's go, let's do it. But I'm not going to sit around and wait on this guy, because I'm not going to be at his whim. Things could change at any point in time, and obviously Conor calls the shots. When you're the biggest star in the game, you get to call the shots. So from that point of view, I understand. I mean, it is interesting, right? Gaethje, the guy that has expressly said, I don't take short notice fights, taking a short notice fight, and one of this magnitude as well. But I think he sees the upside. I'm sure that I imagine, I know that the Dana and the UFC brass are big fans of his. I imagine, there might have been an extra 0 or 2 placed on that paycheck, a little extra money coming in. Gaethje's always said, listen, I know the way I fight, I can't fight for a long time, but I'm going to make sure I capitalize on every moment while I'm here. So it's risky. I mean, and again, it's just as risky on Tony's part as well. I mean, to face a dangerous guy like Justin Gaethje and potentially screw up everything. I mean, with all that he's done and the long road that he's had to get here, it's pretty wild. So I think you got to respect both these guys. But I got to imagine, having not had a chance to speak to either of them yet, obviously look forward to doing so. But having not spoken to him, I have to imagine that just the uncertainty of what lies ahead played into part of it. Like, look, I got a chance right now to take a fight, to get a paycheck, to potentially, move things forward for myself. Let me do it now because, I mean, again, as we've all seen over the past month or so, right, things change on a damn daily basis with this. And so I think you take what you can while you can.
For Gaethje, it's a short lead up to a fight. Like you mentioned, who knows how long he's been training for it. For Tony Ferguson, he's been preparing for a guy that's completely different to Justin Gaethje, a guy that he was going to, take on in grappling exchanges. And we all know Gaethje has that striking and that power to put anybody out. We've seen Tony Ferguson get hit and hurt before. So it's definitely a dangerous fight for both perspectives, for both fighters. I mean, early looking at this fight right now, early on, before fight week even hits, how would you see it potentially going? A lot of media people are already starting to pick Justin Gaethje in this matchup.
Listen, I totally understand it. I mean, on the surface, immediately you'd say, well, listen, Ferguson was getting ready for Khabib. I mean, he was training at the highest level you possibly can. It's kind of a joke, but it's true too, right? Like having to train in isolation and not having your gyms open doesn't affect Tony Ferguson, right? Because of the crazy way he trains. I mean, maybe it wasn't that big of a deal for him. He builds his own training camps and all those things. So I would think immediately Tony Ferguson, I mean, just for the guy that's in form, that was ready for this, yes, a completely different style, but still getting ready for the top lightweight in the world and one of the best pound for pound fighters on the planet. But Gaethje, man, as a wild card coming in, man, the power, the aggression that he has, I understand it. I think I'd probably early on still lean, towards Tony Ferguson for those reasons. But man, Gaethje is as dangerous as they come, and dude, it's gonna be a battle, risky for both guys, and amazing that both of them stepped up, especially given the circumstances.
Yeah. Go
Sorry
for
to jump in. Yeah, well, I was just going to say, while we're talking about this matchup, Cass, this interim title. I mean, Tony Ferguson was the interim champ. Now he's fighting for another interim title. I mean, what do you think of the UFC putting another interim title on the line here? Is Tony Ferguson walking around with 2 belts at the next press conference if he beats Justin Gaethje here, or what?
You damn straight he will. You definitely know he will. Tony Ferguson is that kind of guy, right? He's that kind of guy. No, dude, I think it's a damn shame that he's having to fight for an interim title again. I mean, it's certainly through no fault of his own. I thought it sucked that they stripped him to begin with. To be honest with you, it just sucks. But it is the right thing to do. I mean, I think stripping Khabib or saying this is for the undisputed title, that would be garbage as well. I mean, that would just be I can't fathom that. So what do? I mean, do you go, well, we don't want to insult the guy by making him fight for an interim title again, so let's just make it not a title fight? I mean, like, that's even more disrespect, right? So I think it's incredibly unfortunate. I think it sucks that he has to fight for an interim title again. But I do think it's the right thing to do. And yeah, if he wins, he will show up with 2 belts. You can count on that. And a baseball, probably.
Oh, of course. I mean, the baseball at this point is a permanent part of the gimmick, and I fully expect him to have that in the cage, along with the baseball gloves when he fights Justin Gaethje at UFC 249. I want to talk to you, John, about my favorite part of the Brett Okamoto interview with Dana White. Just one of the particular questions that Brett asked him, and just Dana's response. But just quickly before we do that, I do want to remind everybody about the Ridge Wallet, which we spoke about the last couple of weeks. They are our official sponsors for Submission Radio at the moment. They have stuck by us despite all this coronavirus drama, and we couldn't be more appreciative. Look how streamlined and sexy this wallet is. This is my actual wallet with my actual credit cards. So if you look carefully, you can probably steal all my numbers and make some cheeky purchases for you and the family. It's so small, streamlined. You got this cash strap. This is the way I like it. You can have a money clip if that's something that you're used to. Free worldwide shipping. It is quality. You'll love it. If you don't love it, it's free refunds and free returns around the world. 30,000 plus 5-star reviews. You get a lifetime guarantee. They're giving you a 10% discount code at ridge.com/submission, and then use the code submission and you get your 10% off. And that works site-wide. So you can get a discount on a whole bunch of things. I love how small and streamlined it is. I have it on me when I'm in the gym. I have it at UFC events. During interviews, you'll notice this, or maybe you won't, but look out for it next time. You'll see when we're doing these sit-down interviews very often, you can catch me giving my pocket just a cheeky squeeze, and that's not me touching myself. That's me thinking, and I think everybody has these thoughts when you go, fuck, did I leave my wallet yet again at the bus stop like last time? And then you give your pocket a cheeky squeeze and you go, no, it's okay. The Ridge wallet is there. It's sitting there firmly with all the money and everything I hold dearly. He was there with me in New York when we were covering UFC 244, and Abby Siobhan, our videographer at the time, and I went to Whole Foods to get food, and then we left. We went down a street, and I was like, hey, we'll take this shortcut. It's quicker back to our Airbnb. But it wasn't a shortcut at all. It was actually a street full of people selling meth and other kinds of drugs, and me and Abby thought we were going to die. But the main thing, dead or alive, was that my Ridge wallet was so safe because it was so small, and all the questionable people on that street didn't even see that I had a wallet in my pocket. Now, if I had one of those big chunky leather ones that a lot of people carry around, do you think I'd be here today telling you this story? Probably not. Probably not. I'd still be in New York right now. I've taken it with me to places like Thailand, which is great because, you know, when it's the middle of the night and you're getting a cheap $10 massage and the woman of negotiable affections is trying to pick your pockets, it's so small she can't even find it, let alone steal your shit. So the Ridge wallet comes in handy, and I have taken it all over Asia with me, including Japan. And one night when I was just a hungry man looking for some sushi and I stumbled into a store, but it wasn't a sushi shop at all. It was actually a sex shop full of sex toys. And I was like, well, this is quite embarrassing. But luckily, embarrassment avoided because I had my Ridge wallet on me, and which is good because how else are you going to pay for $500 worth of sex toys? I guess you could use it for groceries and everyday use as well. It's so small that, you know, and it's carbon fiber. So it's super, super duper light. If you want, you can get it in aluminium or titanium or any other crazy hard you know, things that wallets are made out of. I guess what I'm telling you is the Ridge wallet is quality. So Submission Radio, discount, ridge.com/submission. Use the code submission for your 10% cheeky discount, and you can get a whole bunch of sexy things at ridge.com. But I did want to mention my favorite part of the Dana White interview with Brett Okamoto was, of course, when Brett asked about the training quality and the conditions that fighters are going through at the moment, where like they're training out of the garages, there's no sparring partners. Francis Ngannou was on the show talking about how he wasn't really motivated. Everyone's just focusing on body weight training. And Dana White was kind of like, yeah, don't know. And I think what he really wanted to say was, I don't really care. The show rolls on regardless. So I'm wondering what you think, John, as far as the quality of fights that we're going to be seeing over the next few weeks and months, and if they will be up to the level that we're going to be expecting, especially these 5-round, you know, main events.
I think the biggest thing will be, and it's crazy to think about when we're talking about Tony Ferguson, so maybe not him, but
he's
just
exempt.
Up and down.
He's got it covered.
Yeah, there you go. I would say I think cardio is probably the biggest thing. I mean, listen, again, I mean, these athletes, they've been trained. I mean, they do this all the time. And yes, do they ramp up in training camp? Yeah, but, you know, it's not – it's like I always say, like, if you're in a bar and something goes down, like, do you think any one of those guys, like, dude, I would whip everybody's ass in here, but I haven't had a training camp. You know what I mean? Like, no. They're going to handle business. They know how to fight. They understand everything. The biggest thing is, you know, some timing issues for sure, man. You only get timing by going full speed, right? That's the only way you get it. I mean, and then, like I said, cardio. I mean, I know, you know, I've talked to multiple athletes over the last couple of weeks since we've been going through this, and everybody's kind of got the same, you know, basic idea. You know, to keep your group to a minimum. Maybe grab one training partner or two at most. Go get your runs in the park, keep your cardio up. But I don't think you can go with the same intensity if you're not in that gym going through it. So I think that would be my biggest concern is, some timing issues early on for sure. And then again, cardio issues if fights go late. But, this idea that like every fight is just going to be awful because these guys haven't been training right. I mean, these men and women have been training to do this for most of their lives. Like they've got the skills, they've got the talent. So I don't buy into like, just with the level of MMA we're going to see is going to be awful. Like we won't even recognize it. It'll be so terrible. I don't buy into that. But I do buy into the fact that, again, some timing issues early on and then late cardio. Those will be things to watch.
Some heavyweight fights might need to be switched from 3 rounds to 1 round just to maximize the cardio levels. But let me just ask you this while we're talking about it, the weight cutting, John. I mean, that is going to be a major issue, and that's going to be a serious thing fighters are going to be dealing with, especially these guys that, really cut it down to the wire and need to use those saunas and the steam rooms and different communal areas that are going to have to be locked down during the coronavirus. It's so difficult to sort of coordinate, so difficult to keep an eye on, not to mention also cutting that weight while going to an unknown location and dealing with the stress from that. Are you imagining we see a high percentage of fighters miss weight leading into some of these fight night cards?
And not getting their road work in.
Yeah, exactly. We'll see. I mean, I think that could be an issue. We'll see. I do think as far as, the final weight cut goes, I mean, a lot of fighters use the bathtub method with it, which they would do in their hotel anyway. I got to imagine, the UFC usually has a couple of those little personal heaters, the joke that they're in the toaster or whatever that you've seen before. I mean, a lot of fighters have those already. I got to imagine the UFC would have those on hand as well. So I'm sure, the UFC will do everything they can to make that possible. But that is definitely a concern. And, of course, I think the other thing, not only will they make weight, but, are they putting their bodies in weakened states and weakened immune system, which makes them even more at risk of getting the coronavirus or complications from the coronavirus? I mean, that I would not pretend to be a medical expert enough to know how much that would impact it, but it certainly can't seem to help it. So, I mean, I would love to see situations, and I don't know that we're going to see it, but, we've seen fights in the past where two guys have kind of ran into each other on check-in day and be like, what weight are you at? What weight are you at? Well, how about we fight 170 instead of 155? You know what I mean? Like, I would love to see some things like that where fighters come together and just go like, look, hey, we're in the same division, but we both weigh about the same. We're just cutting down to this amount. Why don't we do it, at 165 or whatever? That'd be a great way for people to force the 165 division, right? But, maybe not for the title fight, but at least some of those others, maybe we see some agreed upon catch weights. I mean, there's things that could happen. So that will definitely be one of the most interesting things to watch during fight week is how the weight cut's progressing and, does it put fighters more at risk?
Final question, John, and that is about the man that we've spoken about a little bit today, Conor McGregor. I mean, this thing is for the interim title, which basically should, and you can't really say 100%, but you should guarantee that the winner of this fight fights Khabib next. So let's say Conor McGregor is now out of the shuffle when it comes to fighting Khabib anytime too soon. A lot of people are pointing to Nate Diaz being the logical fight here, the third fight between the two being the return fight for Conor McGregor. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on Conor McGregor's next fight? Do you think it's Nate Diaz? Is that the fight to make now that he's out of the shuffle with Khabib?
Sure would be a good one. I mean, that's a big one that's on the table. I think it's always kind of out there. I mean, I've said before, I think both those guys, Nate and Conor, could lose 5 fights in a row, and you'd put that together and it could still headline a pay-per-view. I mean, people just love those guys that much. They love that rivalry so much. So, I don't think you necessarily have to go to that. I guess kind of part of it depends on what happens at featherweight. I mean, does Max Holloway want to move up and take that rematch? Will Poirier be interested in a rematch? I mean, there's a lot of options out there. The great thing about Conor is, whoever he fights, it becomes an instant interest no matter what. I like the Nate Diaz trilogy does need to happen. I mean, it definitely needs to happen. Does it need to happen right now? I don't know, but it probably does make sense because I don't think Conor is the number one contender right now, and I don't think that he would step in line in front of these guys. So I sure as heck wouldn't argue against it, man. I think it'd be a good one to make, and of course the UFC is going to be looking for big fights, man. They're going to be looking for to recoup some money and keep the ball rolling. So we'll see how it goes. That would be weird though. The trilogy in front of no crowd though.
Yeah, crowd and no media build up, no real press conferences. I don't know. It's like you're missing out on the big fun thing that would come with that fight. Yeah, it's kind of more fun than the fight itself sometimes, just seeing this build up between the two and then the atmospheres and stuff. So it'll be very interesting, especially Nate Diaz maybe even doing a press conference to no media, no crowd, It's
They
going to be
both
weird.
feed off the people so much.
Yeah, I was gonna say like a Zoom press conference probably wouldn't work very well. Probably
Oh,
just
God.
everybody tune in on Zoom and virtually raise your hand and we'll hit you. Yeah, no, you know what? I've talked myself out of it. It's not this fight. This is not the time to do it. Wait until we can have crowds again. So no, that is not the fight to make right now. Absolutely not.
Yeah, that's right. Well, John, we do appreciate your time. Of course, follow the man at MMA Junkie John on Twitter, the MMA Roadshow, one of the finest shows out there at MMA Junkie. You mentioned it before, John. You guys are doing such a great job covering the sport when there's not much going on, and great interviews, great articles as always. Of course, go to MMA Junkie and check out what will be happening with UFC 249. We hope to see you at the event, John, bringing some light into the craziness that is the MMA world. Thank you so much for coming onto the program.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Hopefully we'll have some on-site coverage next week. We'll see.
And with that, guys, that is the end of Submission Radio. We appreciate you tuning in. Another episode of Submission Radio next week, looking at UFC 249. With that, it looks like we have some fights to look forward to. Have a great week, and we'll catch you next week.